So there are some challenges to going even smaller with micro-optics. There's always that pesky diffraction limit. Or maybe not. There's biocompatibility issues. A lot of these medical devices, these things are going inside the body. They may have tissue contact, so these materials have to be non-toxic, non-carcinogenic. And material quality really becomes a limiting factor as components, feature sizes shrink. You think about these little lenses that Joe is making up here that measure 200 microns across. In a lot of lenses, a bubble or an inclusion measuring 200 microns might be acceptable. Well, now that's the whole part. So the material has to be really, really good, and not all suppliers can produce that. If it's not good, then it becomes a yield issue. And then metrology. There's metrology. How do you measure some of these things? And there are ways, of course, scanning electron microscopes, atomic microscopes, expensive stuff that a lot of shops can't afford. So inexpensive metrology methods are really needed, I think, to advance some of these technologies. So everybody's heard of Moore's Law, first postulated by Intel co-founder Gordon Moore, 1965, and it's actually held remarkably true for 40 years, starting with the first microprocessors in 1971. And everybody knows that he predicted that the number of transistors that can be placed inexpensively on integrated circuits doubles approximately every 2 years. So here's a question. Will this apply to optics going forward? Is there a Moore's Law of optics? Well, my forecast is that we're going to see smaller, molded, and ground and polished optics. Right, Joe? Right, Joe? I think vendors will continue pushing the boundaries if demand exists and if the processes remain cost competitive. Optical MEMS techniques are already in use and I think are beginning to become mainstream. And then breaking the diffraction limit. There's a lot of work going on in that area. I'm sure some of you are far more expert in that area than I am, but there's point spread function analysis where you can use analytical techniques to actually derive more precise location information from a blurred spot than the Rayleigh limit suggests. Near field optical scanning microscopy, where sources themselves or detectors are nanoscale in size, so that you're probing extremely small areas. STED is stimulated emission and depletion. This is a technology being worked on at the Max Planck Institute. It uses 2 laser pulses. First pulse is a diffraction-limited spot that's tuned to the absorption wavelength of a fluorophore. It's using fluorescent imaging. So it excites the fluorophores in that region. An immediate second pulse is redshifted to the emission wavelength and stimulates emission back to the ground state. And that's a donut shape, that beam. But the trick is that the depletion pulse goes through a phase modulator that makes that pulse illuminate the sample in the shape of a donut. So the outer part of that diffraction limited spot is depleted, and the center spot is still fluorescent, so you end up being able to determine the location of that fluorophore, again, far in excess of the Rayleigh limit.
It's fluorescence microscopy.
Yeah.
Microscopes
Yeah.
are made that way.
Yes, it's a microscopic technique. So right now, that is limited to ex vivo applications, but maybe that could be adapted for in vivo. And then more sensitive detectors will come that will enable new capabilities. For example, localized surface plasmon resonance imaging based on nanoparticle arrays is already being used for immunoassays with zeptomolar sensitivities. I had to look that one up too. Zepto is 10 to the minus 21. And then near perfect broadband AR coatings, such as that MOFI coating that I showed you, and then carbon nanotube forests. If anybody's seen the electron micrographs of those, there are all these carbon nanotubes standing up on end on a surface, and they look like a little forest, and they mimic structures found in butterfly wings that have extremely low reflectance, black, black, black.